dimineața, good morning. It is my pleasure and my privilege to have you here. I'm Madalina Mocan, working for the Ratio Foundation. As many of you know, this weekend we are celebrating our 10th anniversary, and it is a privilege to have one of the activities, as we were quite busy in my alma mater. We are going to have a panel on Romania's challenges in 2014, and I would like, before going to the panel itself, to invite Professor Bădescu to say a few words on behalf of the faculty and University Babeș Bolyai, as well as to our chairman, Mr. Nicolae Rațiu.
Welcome to this event. We are very glad to have the opportunity to host it because we like Gratis Foundation, and we in political science in Cluj, we do our best to promote democracy, and we are honored to be here in this celebration of 10 years of functioning of the foundation. I think also it's a crucial time for Romania. It's, as Ivan Castel and others said, the past European parliamentary elections shown that democracy is facing serious challenges. So I think it's quite crucial that everyone who cares about the fate of Romania and of democracy come together and discuss and debate and is looking for a solution. So on behalf of my colleagues from political science, I wish you a pleasant and very productive event.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our lecture today and talk. I'm Nicolae Rațiu, Rațiu Foundation. It's a Rațiu Friends and Family Weekend, which is aimed at all our near family, faraway family, friends that are here we've collected. I'd like to be permitted to mention something about my father, because yesterday would be his birthday. The event was always centered around his June 6th birthday. Significant date, seeing as how it was also the day of Allah landing. Easy date to remember as also being my father's birthday. My mother used to say that what singled my father out amongst all the other men that she, young men in those days that she met, they met in 1941, that he was a man who had a very, very clear mission. Other men around did that just English, or talking about Cambridge University, but he was completely clear as to what his mission was, and that continued throughout his life. His initial mission, by now we were talking later, he was a deeply committed Romanian patriot, very proud of his country and heritage, always, and never wavered in that. His mission was to see once again democracy, freedom and democracy installed in Romania. So that was his mission until the day that he came back in January 1990. Then he had a very clear mission and vision for Romania. What kind of Romania he wanted to see, and how to get there. Democratic Romania, how to do it. And he had difficulties inside his party, and being given the opportunity to apply did succeed in being appointed, actually at the encouragement of Adrian Nastasic, who was the Minister of Foreign Affairs at the time, to be appointed Romania's representative to the parliamentary side of NATO. So in that position, he was able to argue for Romanian membership of NATO. Something that he as I said, we talk about the mission, he was very clear that more than anything, would mean that there would be no turning back for Romania. Once a member of NATO, there was no way that Romania would go back to the sort of eastern bloc under the future Soviet or Russian expansion. So you can see that in that sense he was a visionary, today, a visionary continued. So then he succeeded in getting Romania, the NATO, to meet, to arrange for their meeting in Bucharest. Against all odds, he argued won the argument that the NATO meeting, I think it was in '98, would take place in Bucharest, where future adhesion was discussed. Now, I talk about vision. It strikes me that today's Romania, there is no vision. None of the leaders have any vision as to Romania's place in the world, Romania's place in the geopolitical place. Well, I haven't heard it. Maybe other people have ideas for Romania, where they should be, and I'm sure we will explore that subject further today. I'm looking forward to that. And hopefully Romania's leaders or Romania's future leaders might also pick up something and crystallize a serious vision themselves for Romania, which is lacking. So that's all I have to say to you. I won't talk anymore, but thank you all for being here. I shall pass back to Melody.
Before we move further, we seem to have some technical difficulties with the Romanian translation. So I would kindly ask those of you who are in need of translation to Romania to be as patient and kind as possible. I would like now to actually move to the panel discussion itself by introducing Professor Deletan, the Ion Rațiu Professor of Romanian Studies at Georgetown University, and also one of the leading researchers in Romanian history from the UK. Many of you have already seen the bios we have prepared, so I won't read the entire list of accomplishments of our distinguished panelists, but I would just like to say that and to mention that Professor Deletan was working closely with the Rațiu Foundation and was involved in Romania and in researching Romanian history for many, many years, and we are very honored to have him here today.
Thank you, Madalena. It's a double privilege for me to be with you today because I first came to Cluj in 1965 as a very young student and have been back very many times since then. And it's equally, I think, appropriate that I should be here under the aegis of the Rațiu Centre for Democracy because I first met Ion Rațiu in London in 1969 and met him on subsequent occasions in London and after the revolution here in Romania. So my association with Cluj and with the Rațiu Foundation and with Ion Rațiu is a very close one. In my presentation today, I use the phrase security challenges to cover not only what may be perceived as a threat to the territorial integrity of the state, but also the danger posed to the internal cohesion and stability of the state by a failure to respect the rule of law and corruption. After all, disregard for the rule of law and pervasive corruption were the undoing of the Ukraine. Romania, of course, is not Ukraine, but my point is that a failure to uphold the rule of law and to minimize corruption are cancers which eat away at the sound body of the state. I begin with the challenge to Romania posed by Russia's actions in Crimea and in eastern Ukraine. These have alerted the world to the irascibility of the Russian bear. Romanians have a particular reason for being wary of Russia. Russia's involvement down the centuries in the course of Romanian history has led many Romanians to conclude that when the Russians arrive, they rarely leave. Such a conclusion is understandable if we bear in mind that the Romanians were caught up in the Russo-Turkish wars fought between the two powers from the 16th century to the 20th century. It was one of the longest series of conflicts in European history. There were 13 such conflicts between Russia and Ottoman Turkey between 1568 and World War I. In most of these conflicts, the territories of present-day Romania and Moldova were no strangers to Russian occupation. Add to that Soviet Russia's annexation of Romanian territories with a majority Romanian population in 1940 and 1941, and the imposition of Soviet communism in the country after World War II, and we can explain why, to paraphrase Metternich's dictum about France, when Russia sneezes, Romania catches a cold. Romania sits, of course, on the border of Europe. This simple geographical observation is heavy with significance. The territories inhabited by Romanians have, throughout their history, been subject to forces from the east. The threat posed by Stalin's Russia to Romania's territorial integrity in the 1930s drove Romania into the arms of Nazi Germany. Caught between the devil and the deep blue sea, the Romanian response has often been to trace a devious course, accommodating external interests while seeking a credible ally. This was a policy also pursued by Nicolae Ceausescu, one which was counterbalanced by an internal rule which ignored human rights and pursued a disastrous economic trajectory. The Romanian essayist Ion Vianu posed the question, I quote, "What can deliver Romania from this trap of history?" His answer was, first of all, respect for the great values of Europe, above all for the democratic institutions. With that respect comes security. NATO membership is posited upon internal stability of the country, and that stability rests, in the eyes of NATO, on respect for the rule of law. In the forefront of the drive to assist Romania to honour these principles has been the European Union and the United States. NATO membership buttresses Romania's territorial integrity, it offers certainty which previously was lacking, and it underpins the stability necessary to attract foreign investment and economic development. It has been suggested in some recent commentaries in the United States on Romania that before the crisis in the Ukraine, the United States was, I quote, a bystander in the region. But this is to downplay the importance attached by the US to recognizing the pivotal role of both Poland and Romania as the two largest countries in terms of population in East Central Europe in securing NATO's eastern flank and the contribution of both these countries to recent NATO operations. The credible security guarantees sought by Romania from the United States are inherent in the US-Romania security partnership. Romania will allow the US military to use an airbase near the Black Sea as a key logistics hub for getting supplies and troops in and out of Afghanistan. Pentagon officials declared this on the 18th of October last year. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel and Romanian Defense Minister Mircea Zusa finalized the agreement during a meeting that day at the Pentagon. The agreement is important to the Department of Defense because it must lead its current transit hub at Manas in Kyrgyzstan the next year, since in June 2013, Kyrgyzstan's parliament voted not to renew the US lease at Manas Air Base beyond July 2014. The US military has already started the relocation process to the Mihai Kozelniceanu Air Base, which is approximately, as most of you know, 15 miles from downtown Constanța. The airport has a 3,500-metre runway, which is a key for hosting large military transport and tanker aircraft. Known as Forward Operating Site MK, the site provides garrison support for up to 1,350 rotational forces.
Ne scuzați, pe canalul 1, on channel 1, the translation is not working.
So in respect of NATO, Romania has played an active role in promoting the values and objectives of the alliance by participating in its operations and missions. To NATO, Romania brought the largest country in southeastern Europe in terms of area and population, a fairly stable democracy, and a respected military capacity and partner for the Allied forces during the Gulf War of August 1990, February 91, particularly during Romania's service as President of the United Nations Security Council. The country was active in peacekeeping operations in Angola, in Bosnia, in Albania, and sent 860 troops to Iraq after the invasion led by the United States in March 2003. Romania began to send troops to Afghanistan in July 2002. On the 16th of September last year, Defence Minister Dusa declared that Romania would reduce the number of its troops in the International Security Assistance Force in Afghanistan to about 1,000 in the first half of this year. As a further sign of its commitment to the NATO alliance, Romania signed an agreement with the United States in September 2011 to station a ballistic missile defence system at Deveselu Air Base near Caracal, some 150 kilometres to the southwest of Bucharest. Romania then sits firmly, another slide, I put this slide in to show you how recent territorial disputes, which have been resolved by the International Court in The Hague, have affected really Romania's territorial claims in competition with the Ukraine in the Black Sea. So Romania then sits firmly within the strategic interests of the United States. The Dniester River is 80 kilometers from Odessa, the main port on the Black Sea for Ukraine. The Prut River is about 300 kilometers from Bucharest. Between these two rivers sits another of Romania's neighbours, Moldova. Moldova, as you know, is an area of competition between Russia on the one hand and the European Union and NATO on the other. In Western hands, Moldova threatens Odessa, Ukraine's major port, also used by Russia on the Black Sea. But in Russian hands, Moldova threatens Bucharest. For Moldova in particular, but also for Romania, the separatist statelet of Transnistria is a potential Trojan horse. It has had a de facto independence since the Moldovan Civil War in 1992. And this frozen conflict remains a key obstacle to Moldova's EU integration, a drag on the regional economy and a strain on European Union and Russian relations. According to its constitution, Moldova is a neutral state and is therefore unable to formally join any military alliance or provide its territory for military bases of external powers. To amend the constitution would require the support of 86 members of the Moldovan Parliament, which would be impossible for the Alliance for European Integration in Moldova to achieve without the support of the Communist Party there. It is in Russia's interest to keep the status quo. In this way, it can keep Moldova out of NATO and retain its leverage over the Republic. Russia military operations in Moldova and Transnistria would be more complicated than in Crimea, given the distance from the Russian mainland and the need to fly through Ukrainian or Romanian airspace to resupply troops in Transnistria. This need would be obviated should Russia control Odessa and the area of the Ukraine bordering the northern arm of the Danube, bringing it to the frontier of both Transnistria and of Romania. Russia's presence and potential military build-up in Transnistria, combined with its other political and economic levers, will guarantee a difficult and potentially destabilising situation in Moldova if Chișinău is to follow through with its EU integration efforts. In May 2014, the President of the European Commission, José Manuel Barroso, in a joint press conference with Moldovan Prime Minister Iurie Leancă, announced that on the 27th of June, the EU and Moldova would sign their free trade and association agreements within the framework of the Eastern Partnership Initiative. Leancă thanked Barroso, I quote, for having recognised the European prospects of the Republic of Moldova, because we are acting on the basis of the supposition that there is no alternative to our efforts to build a functioning, stable and prosperous democracy than to continue on this path and line of European integration. End of quote. As the date for the EU-Moldova summit approaches, fears of Russian destabilisation efforts in Moldova will grow. That said, polls suggest that the pro-Russian communists could come to power following Moldova's general election in November, thereby sabotaging an EU deal themselves. In an address to the Atlantic Council in Washington on the 29th of April this year, US Secretary of State John Kerry declared, I quote, "Together we have to make it absolutely clear to the Kremlin that NATO territory is inviolable. We will defend every single piece of it. Article 5 of the NATO treaty must mean something, and our allies on the front lines need and deserve no less." End of quote. Kerry's promise to defend NATO members was echoed by Secretary of Defence Chuck Hagel on the 2nd of May, that is last month, in an address to the Woodrow Wilson Centre in Washington, D.C. NATO allies, he declared, must reaffirm that from the Mediterranean to the Baltics, allies are allies. Our commitment to the security of every ally is resolute. NATO must stand ready, he continued, to visit the basic principles underlying its relationship with Russia. The historical record now speaks clearly for itself, and it makes it clear that NATO has